St. Tammany Council meets right now to determine when voters will be able to pick their next sheriff.
As Rob Masson reports in Mandeville, this comes after former Sheriff Randy Smith resigned last week after he pleaded guilty to attacking a man in a restaurant.
The St. Tammany Council is wasting little time in considering a call for a special election to replace former third-in-command Brett Eibert, who was installed as interim sheriff less than a week ago. Eibert stepped in as part of a deal that had former Sheriff Randy Smith pleading guilty for an attack on a patron at a Madisonville bar over a month ago. Several people have been named as possible permanent successors, including Slidell Acting Police Chief Daniel Susano and former New Orleans Police Chief Ronald Surpass.
Well, even though last Saturday's election results were very good and very positive, reflecting on the agency, I think they want to shore up that public trust. I think they want to make sure that the public confidence is moving forward.
That special St. Tammany Council meeting is just getting underway. We'll let you know about whether or not they've set a November election date to see who will be the next permanent sheriff in St. Tammany Parish. From Mandeville, Rob Masson, Fox 8 Local First. Back to you.